Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper. On today's episode, I am met with the beautiful Amber, who's also known as the Mortician in the Kitchen. And we talk some deep and some heavy things. We definitely discuss mental health. We touch on topics like suicide. And so if any of those are going to affect you, maybe just listen to or watch this episode with caution. But it's a good episode, and we do talk about food as well. So let's get into it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper Podcast. I am joined by the beautiful Amber, who most people would know as the Mortician in the Kitchen. Welcome, Amber. So Amber, obviously we have been kind of chit-chatting online, which, my parents' generation don't really understand a whole lot of social media, and sort of they're like, stop telling everybody all your details and all putting it all out there. But you and I would never know each other without social media. Let's be honest. We do have a couple of
Yeah,
mutual
yeah.
friends in common, which does happen in this space. But why don't you tell everybody who you are and how you came to be Mortician in the Kitchen, which I'm obsessed with.
That seems like a fair question. So like 10 years ago-ish, I don't know. We were talking earlier about how time has no meaning, and I always get caught up because I'm like, I don't know how long it's been. Yeah, I'm a licensed funeral director. I went to mortuary school. I think the easiest explanation is that like I've worked in food service forever, and like since I was like 15 or 16, and I think that I was attracted to the funeral world for the same reason that I stayed in hospitality so long, is that I am very hospitality driven, and I like making people feel good and comfortable when they're not feeling good. And I think that we forget how important food is because like
Yes.
how do I say I stop myself a lot. I'm always like, how do I say? When people are like hangry is a very real thing, and they come in and
Literally,
yeah,
people know to avoid you like the
you
plague. Jen's don't throw peanuts at her or
yeah.
give her a muffin or something. Yeah.
I I packed up some stuff for my boss yesterday, and I put pretzels in the bag, and I was like, so there are some stickers to hand out, and there's also a snack. Like I'm very food motivated. When I was little and I came home from school, my parents would be like, "How was school today?" And I'd be like, "Well, we had a snack." So so this is why when I'm like, well, it's hard to say how I got started because I think I am food motivated and have been since an early age. But yeah, I just sort of like working in funeral services, I really realized how important food was. It sort of was this thing where every single funeral, people would, they get up and they talk about the decedent, and they would always bring up food, whether or not it was a favorite restaurant that they went to, a favorite drink that they shared, a favorite meal that the decedent prepared. It was just this fluidity that I began to notice, is that no matter who the person was, no matter what their religion was, no matter what their age was, food was always a connecting piece. And it was weird because it was sort of just like a aha moment, and I didn't know what to do with it for a really long time. It was like it's taken me almost 4 or 5 years to really even figure out what I'm trying to say, and it's like, like I'm gesturing because it's like I feel it. It's this thing where I'm like, I know I'm onto something, but it's like, but what is it? Is it that I want to ultimately always say we have more in common than we have differences? We all die, first of all, but we all eat. And maybe people don't get to fall in love. Maybe I hope everybody does. Maybe you don't get to have a pet. Maybe you don't get to travel, but every day, every human has to get up and eat to sustain themselves. So it just became this thing that I sort of like went down this rabbit hole, and it was like the more that I scratched at the surface, the more I would find. And I've just sort of gotten to a point where I've like thought of a name for myself. I'm like, I'm a culinary grief
Yeah.
educator.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes sense. Um so yeah, I don't know. It's every time people are like, what do you do? I'm like, I don't know. That's a fair question.
as a society, listen, I love to read self-help books and, business books and anything that's going to kind of help me in business and in life. And I feel like sometimes in society there's a lot of pressure to sort of, have your purpose and have your why and have all of this sort of figured out. Especially, I mean, I turned 40 last year, and I'm still single, and as I always joke, my brother has ticked every box. He's got the dog, the two kids, the house. The wife. Whereas I just went, I'm off to New York. Bye. And away I went. But like, I don't think what I think is amazing about our generations now and the ones coming after us is there is more of that freedom and that acceptance of sort of, listen, we all don't have it figured out. Our parents don't even have it figured out. I mean, we're all really, adulting is hard, and anyone who says it isn't is a liar. I'm sorry, because it is. It's just, it's sickness, it's death, it's life, it's love and loss, it's everything, and it's hard. Sometimes it's really, really hard. And I think, we just need to take less pressure off ourselves and stuff. And I did a whole TEDx talk on judgment, but like taking that judgment off of, okay, you're Mortician in the kitchen, you're Amber, I mean, who cares if you haven't got it figured out? I mean, I personally, like, when I found you, again, it just goes to show social media. When I was during COVID, I was stuck in a pretty much windowless basement. And what I do in the funeral space is very people orientated. It's not sort of things virtual, and I don't deal with the bodies, and so I didn't have a whole lot of work. I helped where I could, and I did what I could, and I did do a lot of virtual services. But my job is very much about food and drink and bringing people together and the celebrant part of it. And so I found myself twiddling my thumbs a lot, and actually how the podcast got started. But like that, reading all my different self-help books, it tells you, like, what do you love doing in life and how can you make that work? And exactly like you, I went, well, I love food. I mean, food.
I love
Okay,
food.
what next? I really like the funeral space. Could I do funeral food? Like, and I think that's actually how I came across you. I went down this rabbit hole of Googling, and I came across funeral potatoes, which apparently is an Irish thing, but I feel like it's an American Irish thing. I've never heard of it in my life. I think you did a recipe on it. Did you?
Yeah, the Mormon
Yes,
funeral
that's it.
potatoes.
Yeah, so I've never heard
Hmm.
of that back home. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
we're big into, and actually somebody sent me I think on TikTok, which I'll send to you, of a Irish comedian talking about Irish food, Irish funerals and food. It's very funny, and how we always had sandwiches. Sandwiches were just what we did, like, and there'd always be one woman in the kitchen just
Yeah.
divvying out sandwiches. But it was
Yeah,
always
yeah.
revolved around food and drink, and so whether that's where it came from, but so I think what you have is brilliant. And look, whether you have it all figured out or it's still a work in progress, I think it doesn't matter here nor there. I think it's brilliant what you do, and like the recipes. I mean, I love watching all your recipes, and I know it's so good. And
Thanks.
people
Yeah.
don't realize as well behind the camera the work it takes to do it. Like, I think one made me
Hmm.
laugh where you said, I think you made a kind of how you tried to record and you failed to record the whole thing. You tried to record the whole process and failed to
Yeah.
record, and I'm like, that happens. Sometimes you do your best thing and you're like, God damn it, I never
Yeah.
pressed record.
Yeah,
But
I did that with my bagels. I was so mad. I like had all this cool stuff and I was like, wow, people are going to be super into this. And then I went to look at it and I was
yeah,
like, son of a, oh man.
yeah, I think, listen, we have to stop being so hard on ourselves, and it's not easy. But what I love about what you do, for your Instagram account, and to be honest, I don't know, are you on many others, but Instagram is kind of where I'm at. But you bring your you bring grief into it, like, so you're showing these recipes, but you bring grief into it. What I love, Amber, is you bring a realness and a rawness. Like, you talk about mental health. And I was only just
Mhm.
talking on a podcast recently with another female about this, and how, and I joked with it at a service this morning with funeral directors. There, when people say, "How do you do what you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I drink." Now, I joke when I say that, but I
Yeah.
kind of joke. Um, that is something I do to release. But like baking, cooking, that is
Mhm.
also something I do to release. Eating, also something I do to release. What I love is that
Yeah.
you don't shy away from peeling back that layer for everyone to see. Like, tell me more about that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
scary to me. I'm like, good for you. Woo.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the food did become, I call it, my newfound word is, I call it like the anxious hands, and I found that with dressing bodies too, and I swear this will all fit together. It's kind of what you were saying is, these are all releases, and it's really important to me to try to provide ways for people to find a release. And I don't, I don't know. You said something earlier about like, oh, your parents being like, you don't have to share everything with everybody, and I've also been told that, and I don't know. I just don't really care. I mean, I care. I I have been sad my
Yeah.
entire life. I remember being really depressed as a child, and I remember having people sort of wield my mental illness against me, and I don't know. I think I've just lived with it for so long, and at some point I just stopped caring. I think for me, social media is this really, really wonderful place for me to forget that there are other people, and I give myself the freedom to just be me. And it, I've had so many people just I've had so much positive feedback from people, and I really do believe that, if there are like 1,000 people online that are like, it's really inappropriate that you talk about your mental health and it makes me uncomfortable, but there are 10 people that are like, thank you so much. Like, I care so much about those 10 people. Like, if there are other people that don't have to suffer or feel bad, if like whatever it is about my like totally bananas inability to censor myself, like I think that maybe this is a gift that life or my brain gave me, and if I can help other people feel better, or if I can make life easier for them, then like that makes all of my suffering feel okay. And I think that everything for me is about like, well, this is it and there's nothing I can do. And I take Zoloft now. I'll put that out there. I'm on antidepressants and I love it. It's the best decision I ever made. So on this topic, if there are people that are thinking about taking antidepressants and you think that it will numb you or make you less of yourself, it's only made me a better version of me. I joke around that I'm like, man, I have like a total I don't know if this is too dark of a joke, but I'll say it. I'm like, I have like a serial killer pulse now. Like I can just like I don't physically react to things anymore in the way that I used to. Like if someone online was like, you suck and I hate your content, I'd be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. Well, why? And now I'm just like, all right, sorry.
Amazing.
Like if other people, yeah.
Because there is, like, there are people out there suffering. And so, and I do, you and the modern mortician, and there's a few of you guys who are sort of quote unquote death influencers, which I do love that that's a term. It's like, what? Um, but it is important, I think, as well for you guys, and she addresses it too, Melissa. I think it's super important because you guys have so many followers, and for whatever reason they're following you. Maybe it's the cooking, maybe it's the funeral aspect, maybe they friends with you, maybe as we all know, funeral and death, it does attract gothics, people, or attract then people dark with dark thoughts. It attracts a lot of sort of the darker element, and whether that's in a good or a bad way, and whatever is your, as I say, whatever's your business is your business. Whatever you like to do, and or whatever you want to do. But I think it's really important, you guys have this platform and all these people following you, and as you said, if you can reach 10 people in the 10,000 that follow or whatever it is, that's huge. I mean, even in my services, like I said it today, some gentleman got up and he sort of said, I didn't speak to the deceased in sort of 15 years. And when I got up after, I said, it doesn't matter whether you spoke 15 years ago, 15 minutes before he died, or 50 years ago. What matters is that he made an impact on your life and you made an impact on his, and for the positive, and that's why they were there. like every single one of us makes an impact. Like my, the mailman that I might take my mail from, the person I just walk past on the street, everyone has an image of us in our brain, and so whether you impact for good or bad, and sometimes when I'm hungry, usually, I'll be snarky with somebody. I might be like, oh, for God's sake, can you hurry up with my Starbucks or whatever it might be? And I walk away and I'm like, didn't need to be snarky, Jen. You didn't need to be snarky, because now that person might have been having a bad day, and then they're like, "Oh, that snarky bitch," whatever it might be. So, listen, we're not all going to go around with roses and peonies and it's all daisies and great. But I think my very roundabout point is, I think it's really important that you are so open and honest. And while my parents, bless them, try to keep me from mouthing off too much, like you, I don't have anything to hide. I am who I am. I don't lie. Honesty and transparency are what I believe. And we all struggle. And, you know, sometimes life is shit. It's
Mhm.
shit.
Yeah,
And whatever
yeah.
you see on Instagram, whatever you see online, that person has shitty times in their life. It doesn't matter who the freaking hell they are. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that I believe that the transparency and that honesty it is a much needed sort of medicine for people. I think, and maybe you see this too. I it's again, I'm like, how do I say? It's like you see a condensed form of it when you work in death. You work with death so much that you know how people are probably feeling, but this is their first death. So for them it's very confusing. So it's sort of like being a psychologist, right? You're talking to someone and they're trying to explore all of these feelings. But because you're like, yeah, like you're sort of checking off all these boxes of what this feeling is, and this is what it is. And so you're sort of in this position of not like power, but like because not like an oppressive power, but you have the ability to give people permission to feel, because they're really confused. They're like one of the first things that I say to people when someone dies, when they've experienced a death, is I'll say, if you're feeling angry right now, if you're feeling relief, if you are glad that they are gone, that's okay. Like I go straight for like all those negative emotions because I know you're feeling it. It's like I there's a 9 out of 10 chance that you're probably feeling it. Because like a lot, I mean, like, look, there's obviously unexpected deaths, but God willing, most of us are supposed to say, God willing, we just suffer in our bed for months before we die. Um, that's not how I want to go. But like my grandpa had, I have a lisp, so I can't say Alzheimer's. My husband makes fun of me. So the old timers disease. And when he died, it was kind of relief because he was just trapped in his body. He was staring at the ceiling, couldn't eat, couldn't drink. A nurse was just putting a sponge on his tongue. And to be able to tell people who are feeling like so much emotion, if you're able to just go, hey, if you feel really angry or if you feel happy right now that he's gone, it's okay. And that release of that tension that we hold inside of us, I believe that goes into how we are in everyday life when we are a little brisk with the Starbucks person, or when we choose to not let someone in traffic, when we're feeling road rage. Like all of that is connected. Like everything, the way that I see the world is just everything is like this. Like there's nothing
yeah,
that's separate.
completely.
So
I mean, I could not agree with you more. To be honest, it's sort of how I almost came about what I started to do 15 years ago in Ireland, which was, you know, it doesn't have to be in a church. Like I might have been raised Catholic, but that doesn't define who I am from start to finish. Like, yeah, do I want some Catholic prayers at my funeral? Yeah, but I want my funeral to be in like a cool venue with great music and great food. I want it to be something I would want to
yeah.
have gone to. And I find with a lot of my families, it's not having it in a funeral chapel and not having it in church grants them, without even saying a word, grants them permission to grieve whatever way that suits them. So whether it's screaming, crying, laughing, joking, making inappropriate jokes, things.
Yeah.
I've seen it all. And I just think it's so important because we're all completely individual. And like exactly what you said about so many people, especially when we come to parents and when they've kind of gone to a certain age and cancer riddled or whatever it might be, it is a relief. And it's, again, it kind of comes down to just stop judging each other and stop judging yourself. Just because you feel relief because mom is gone doesn't mean you don't miss her in the exact same strength. You can miss somebody and hate them. You can love somebody with every fiber of your being and still hate them. Like, leaving you, if that's, and that often happens with suicide as well. It's like you hate them for having left you, and just completely you think it's selfish and you go down that road, and but you still love them with every fiber of your being. We're complex human beings. It's
Yeah, and people always want to place things into binary oppositions. They're like, well, I'm either sad or I'm happy, or I'm angry, or I'm in love, and it's like, no, it is complex. My cousin died by suicide when I think he was 17 and I was about 15, and I like want to write about it at some point. I'm And it's not that it's hard to write. I don't, it's like I always have so much stuff that I want to sit and write about, and I sort of just let whatever I feel like writing about that day take over. But when I close my eyes, I can remember my aunts, just going, it was so selfish. It was so selfish of him to leave. It was so selfish of him to do that. And I remember thinking, like, well, if he was sad, then why did we want to keep him? Why should he have to stay if he doesn't want to be here, if we're all going to die? But then I think about him all the time. At Hanukkah, I was talking to my aunt, and we were talking about Jimmy, and every single day you just wonder, like, who would he be today? Like, if he had been on the right meds, would he still be here? Which, again, when we were talking earlier about, like, why do I just talk about what I talk about with very little disregard sometimes? I think that it's like, well, my cousin died by suicide when I was 15, and we were very close when we were kids, and he was a little weird and I'm a little weird, and yeah, aren't we? Yeah, aren't we all? And what if someone had just said, like, it's totally fine if you feel the way you feel. Like, it's okay. Like, oh, do you feel sad? Do you want to, like, sometimes I'll be talking to people, I'll be like, you ever in your car, you just want to, like, let go of the steering wheel? And people be like, no. And I'm like,
just
oh, okay. And I'm like, I know they're lying. I know you do. Hey man, if you do, it's totally
yeah.
fine. But I what if finding that middle ground, like, saves
Yeah.
somebody's life? Like, what if somebody is, you just feel so sad and alone. You're like, well, nobody else feels this way. And it's like, no, like, I do. Like, I feel this way. And if that keeps them here, anyways,
No,
complex. Things are
it's very
complex.
true, and it's very hard for us as a community as well to try and reach people, or to, because sometimes I think we do take the onus on ourselves that we have to kind of fix the situation, and it's physically impossible for us to do it. We can do what we can. I mean, I'm just, as you were speaking there, I was remembering to a service I was doing of a young man, and he left behind a young daughter, and she did not want to come into the service, and I was celebrant for the service, and I was in the room, and her mom popped her into the room with me, and she wanted to talk to her friends. She did not want to come into the service, and I said, look, and again, you kind of have to weigh up am I overstepping, or what's right or wrong or whatever. But I just turned around to her and I said, listen, this is absolutely fucking shite what's happened to you. And she just looked at me, it's like an adult cursing. And I said, it is. I said, this is just shit. I didn't even say I'm really sad or I'm really sorry, because I hate that I'm sorry for your loss personally.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just said, look, talk to your friend, do whatever you need to do in this moment. I said, if you want me to record the service so you can at least listen to it at a later date, or if you want the words we say because you don't want to be in the room, I said, whatever, if you want any part of this, I'm happy to help. But I said, you have to look after yourself. Your mom, I know she wants the best for you, whatever. And that was it. Like, I didn't kind of, not, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not going to, sometimes, like, these
Yeah.
kids, they need mom to kind of stop being mom for a hot second and be devastated that her lover's gone or whatever it is. And not everybody wants to, like, everyone back home in Ireland, if there's a funeral, I have to go back home to like a family funeral. Everyone assumes I want to go in and see the dead body because of what I do. And I'm like, no, I don't want to see
Right.
anybody. I don't, because for me, it's like I want to remember them laughing, and that's my choice. So back back it up there, Auntie Karen. No. Exactly as you said, like finding that middle ground and just letting people make their own choices and their own decisions. If direct cremation with no service, nothing whatsoever, is what they want to have, then that's what they want to have. I mean, you think a funeral service or
Yeah.
a memorial or some sort of something is cathartic. I do, but it's not my business to tell you what to do, and I just think the sooner we all
Mhm.
start minding our businesses and letting other people, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I always say, or you
Yeah,
should people. You don't. There's no you should not shouldn't all over people. Don't no shoulds.
yeah,
You don't have to say, well, you
yeah.
should have this funeral. You should see the body. It's like you should just do whatever you
Yeah,
want to
you
do,
could
and
do
that's fine.
that. You could do all of the above.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah,
now
yeah,
you work
yeah.
in a funeral home.
I did. I actually make
Whoa!
here now. uh yes, which plays into earlier when we were talking about like, oh, if there's something that you can't say or don't want to say or we need to like not talk about, it's part of the reason that I'm like I can say whatever I want is because I chose not to go back into the funeral service for sort of that specific reason is I can do a lot more good now. Because like on topics of my mental health, I worked for
Right,
Forest Lawn and I had had disordered eating, which probably is also why I'm so super obsessed with food now. Because I've struggled for a really long time with my relationship with food. And I had that used against me when I worked there. It became this thing where I was like I had this mental illness and I was a bad person because I had admitted that to having a prior eating disorder, by the way. Like wasn't even like, yeah, I have an eating disorder right now and I'm suffering. It was like it was one of those like mean girl
yes.
moments. Like, have you seen Mean
Yeah,
Girls? And they're like, yes, okay. So it's like all the girls are in front of the mirror and they're like, oh, my
yeah,
pores are so big. And they're like, my nose. And then they're like, my armpits. And so these girls were like saying all these things. And I was like, oh, I think I'm supposed to bond with these women. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. I used to have like an eating disorder. Oh. And then that became a thing where it turned into me being like a body shamer. Like all of a sudden it was like Amber's a really bad person and she thinks that we're all like gross and she doesn't like us and she thinks she's better than us. And so like I again probably like why am I so free? Like why do I feel so free? Because it's almost like I'm just like I'm gonna own this. Like I'm gonna own whatever it is about myself. Like I'm in charge of my narrative and I'm certainly not gonna let anybody do this to anybody else ever again because it was like those girls I hesitate to say everything happens for a reason because I am very happy with my life now. But I went to school to be an embalmer and I lasted 4 months at Forest Lawn because I ended up coming in every single day throwing up because the girls were like super mean to me and they stopped taking their lunch with me and like isolated me now I'm not an embalmer anymore. And if you work at Forest Lawn, you definitely can't be on podcasts and talk about this stuff. I would be in
sure.
so much trouble for saying anything. Like immediate, yeah. So and then I ran
Yeah.
Undertaking LA, which was a I don't know if you know about that. No, I
No,
don't
I don't.
expect people to
I
like
just
know
know. I
anything about
know
me.
of Caitlin, and I don't know a whole lot about her. I
Yeah.
did read one of her books, I think. And it's funny because her name in Ireland we just say Caitlin Doherty, but it's something Doe. I don't know. Yeah,
Doty,
yeah.
yeah, Doty,
Every time people say it,
Doty.
what? That's
Yeah,
madness. Um, but yeah, no, I
yeah,
I saw the photo on
yeah.
Instagram. The poster.
Yeah. So I did that for
Oh, wow.
4 or 5 years. And that's when I really got to help people, dress the dead and wash the dead. And I got to have all of those really intimate moments with people that I wanted. And then after that ended, certainly couldn't go to a corporate home after having the freedom to not have anyone breathing down my neck about how much time I was spending with a
Yes.
family. And then COVID happened. So that was like COVID basically happened right after
How
that
did you change
ended.
for a reason
And
or?
then she wanted to sell the bit because Caitlin basically wasn't like her books were doing so well. She just
Right,
basically was never there. Like she started the funeral home thinking that she would be able to be there, and then her books took off, and she was just like on
right.
book tour
I
constantly.
was about to say, still
Um,
doing that.
and
I
so
didn't even know. I didn't know.
no, I don't think she is. I know she just moved to the East Coast. But yeah, so she sold the funeral home, and I didn't have any ownership in it. And then we just sort of like parted ways, and we're sort of thinking about like what I wanted to do from there. And yeah, I COVID changed so much for me. Like for everybody when they're like COVID was like the worst year for them, COVID
Yeah.
was like the best year of my life. It was because I didn't have a job and I was on unemployment because of the way that things worked out. So I got to cook all the time. Like I immediately made the best use of it. I was like, okay, this is temporary. I don't know how long this is going to go on for, but I do believe that things will get better. And I'm going to either be really happy that I spent all of this time reading and researching and just pushing through, or I'm going to be really bummed that I squandered this year. So I woke up every single day and I cooked and I read books and I just like, I downloaded information like I was in the
Oh, that's
Matrix.
amazing. Kind of similar.
And
I made the most of it. I
yeah,
was like, well,
yeah, I used it. I was like, this is, I have to think of this as a gift. Like it was like, I was like, hold on, I'm experienced with this kind of depression.
yeah.
Like it will get better. Yeah, and then after that I was like, okay, like, well, life is opening back up. What do I want to do? And my partner and I talked a lot about it, and he didn't want me to be around people because of COVID. Because I live in LA and COVID was just
Yes.
rampant here. So I always wanted to learn how to make beer, and it made sense because it coincides with cooking. I feel like I'm a master of yeast now, and I love baking and cooking, and it's really helped so much with my baking. And I also like to drink, so there was a real twofer there. And I think I posted about this before, but in Ireland, the bartenders, like I, and maybe you can solidify the actual history, but I read it in like the Irish Times that like bars used to kind of become funeral homes because
Mhm.
during the famine, there were too many bodies, and
Yep.
who can keep things
Yep.
cold? Bars. So bodies started going into the bars, and I was like, I felt it. I felt that there was this real, because like I'm very Irish. I mean, I'm very American, but my DNA says
Tell by your look.
98% Irish, just county Cork. Yeah. So I kind of feel like I was just destined to be a bartender, funeral director, beer maker, dead
Well,
body
let me tell
schlepper,
you
sort of.
a little bit of history or something to do with me. So, how I knew I was destined when I looked back at my turn into the funeral space, and I was a wedding planner, but two friends of mine passed away. Like that was the actual pivotal moment.
Mm.
But when I looked back at my sort of childhood and history, when I was 15 years of age, I worked in a bar called the Morgue. And the reason why it was called the Morgue is because it was a bar in quite a busy small little town. I wouldn't even call it a town, but basically people would mostly men would come in, get absolutely rat arse drunk, go out, and there was a railroad just in front. They'd fall on the tracks, get run over, and so they'd drag the body back in and stick it in
Oh,
in the cooler. And so that was the history I was
oh,
told. And so yeah, you were not wrong. And typically, um, I don't think I don't know of one that exists still to this day. But yeah, they'd be the postman, they'd like be the mail, they'd be the funeral home, and they'd be a bar. Yeah, yeah, that's
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Funeral directors really had that history of being, they were just regular people. I mean, here in the US they were like the carpenters, maybe they were how do you say, I was going to say hearse, but like
Yeah,
emergency like drive EMTs, like, so that car, like the old school car was like a double. It was like, maybe we take you to the hospital, maybe we take you to the morgue. If we're a little shady, we're going to take you to the morgue and take those body parts out, like. But yeah, like a lot of like funeral directing really is a second career. It's not, and I kind of, in the way that I think that death belongs to everybody, really do like to press upon that it's like, well, we're all
Yeah.
funeral directors. We all have something that contributes to it. And it sort of coincides with other things. And that's a good way to make sure that, you're not completely reliant on people dying to make all of your
Yes, well,
money.
that's
So
for
that's
sure.
always a good thing.
Now, tell us this as we wrap up. What is the future for like Amber? Like, is there anything in the pipeline? Are you working with any companies, or have you got any fingers in any pies that you want to tell
Yeah.
us about?
Yeah, so I'm working on I'm writing now. I've always wanted to write. So I started a little baby magazine called Better Funeral Homes
Oh,
and Memorial Gardens, which is a play on Better Homes and Gardens. And it's basically now I'm just writing all of my material and putting it into little issues, because it makes everything that I talk about makes more sense when it's in context. So like the first issue that I released is called it's like Let's Play Doh, and it's about grief and art therapy and how we give Play-Doh to little kids, because again, working the anxious hands, working with your hands and creating things allows you to process your grief. And so how do we apply that to cooking? And so I give you 3 or 4 recipes. It's like challah, bagels, donuts, and talking about the applications of Play-Doh therapy with actual dough. And then I'm working on a Golden Girls episode, because I'm just sort of obsessed with the Golden Girls, and that has some fun recipes from the Golden Girls, but then it talks about
mhm.
aging in place. So it's like 8 tips for how to age in place, aging in grief. So each issue is basically like, the very first question is like, how does food and grief fit together? Each issue is sort of builds on like, here are the recipes, here's the application, and then I try to make
Yeah.
it fun and entertaining so that it's not
Oh,
just
very
like a
cool. I'll
textbook.
have to sign up to your newsletter. That's the first time. Oh my gosh, how did I
Yeah.
miss it? Okay. Well, we'll
Yeah.
get you to give us the link if you haven't already, and we'll put it in the podcast and in the YouTube so that people can sign up, because I'm certainly going to sign up straight after. I love food and I work in the funeral space, so it sounds like the perfect magazine for me.
It's great. I actually feel really excited about it. I got a really great program that makes like really gorgeous looking magazines. I have like right next to me is my copy of Bon Appetit and Veg News. I
Love
obsessively read
it.
magazines,
I
so
love it.
I've
Well, it was an
yes.
absolute pleasure talking to you, Amber. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we did hit on some,
Yeah.
topics there that I think a lot of people will be able to relate to. So if they want to reach out, they can reach out to us, and we will add all your links down below as well, and so that they can reach out to you directly as well if they want to. Thank you. So that was another episode of the Glam Reaper podcast. Definitely a lot of topics covered there. Please do reach out to us, glamreaperpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, would like to reach out to Amber directly, we can provide you with her information. And yeah, we're here to help on any of the topics we talked about today. So definitely reach out to us. And if you enjoyed today's episode, or there's a guest that you would like to hear, or have us interview on the Glam Reaper, then please do let us know that as well. And we'll talk to you soon.